Autism spectrum disorder
is a condition which involves challenges with social communication skills, restricted interests, and repetitive behaviors.
There are 500,000 children on the spectrum in the United States alone.
That is 1 in 68 children.
making ASD a serious and growing public health issue.
The financial and emotional tolls on families are great,
with parents incurring many out-of-pocket expenses,
as well as losing work hours and career advancements.
The cost is nearly 10 times more
than raising an average child.
With early access to treatment and care, we can significantly improve a child's outcome.
But access to effective interventions is less available for some,
especially families who are under-resourced.
We aim to change this situation.
We are AirB!
We are AirB.
Autism Intervention
Research Network.
For behavioral health.
We bring community and academics together.
Our studies have targeted core impairments of social communication in home and school,
enrolling over 1,100 families and children in research. AirB has been in the community for nearly 10 years.
We have been pioneers in the field of collaborating together in community settings
instead of research centers.
We work in homes.
We work in schools.
We teach skills and strategies to children and to those who care for them.
Our interventions are informed by you.
We listen to each other.
Together, we have pushed the field forward of increasing participation of under-resourced and underserved families in research.
And increasing outcomes for children, families, and teachers.
And improving research designs.
And bringing greater awareness to the community.
We are AirB.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Sue Lee, and I'm a PhD candidate researcher at the UCLA Center for Autism Research and Treatment. This is the 6th annual Community Autism Conference hosted by the AirB, a collaborative network of autism researchers, professionals, and families. This conference is offered in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Korean. The Spanish session will take place shortly after this English conference and starts at 4:30. The Korean conference will take place tomorrow at 10 a.m. All of our conference recordings will be available on our website, airbnetwork.org, and Cons, our coordinator, will type that into the chat so you guys can see our website. So the beauty of this conference and the work that we do with community is that we really work together, regardless of our race, ethnicity, native language, and cultural backgrounds, in order to achieve a common goal, improving lives of diverse families of individuals with autism. So I'm really excited that many of you are here with us today, and we'll start with the welcome message by our leader, Dr. Connie Kasari, the principal investigator of the AirB Network and distinguished professor of human development and psychology and education at UCLA. She's also the president-elect of the International Society for Autism Research, which hosts the world's largest gathering of autism researchers and specialists every year. Also, we have Ms. Felica Jones with us as well, the director of the Healthy African American Families, one of our main community partners for AirB. She has extensive experience working with minority communities, helping to reduce health disparities through research and education. So let's hear from Dr. Kasari and Ms. Felica Jones now.
Good afternoon. I'm Connie Kasari at UCLA, and I'm here with Felica Jones from Healthy African American Families. And we want to welcome you to our 2021 Community Conference virtual this year. The theme of our conference is Mapping Your Future, Self-Determination and Strategies for School Success During COVID. So we are very fortunate today that we have one of our academic partners, Dr. Brian Boyd from the University of Kansas, who will talk about self-determination and the intersection of race, ethnicity, disability, and income. Fortunately, he will also define what self-determination is. And then the regional center takes a different perspective on the meaning of self-determination by putting in place a program that has funding for families. And there are procedures and policies related to this that we are fortunate that Sorrel Markowitz from the Westside Regional Center will walk you through and will answer your questions about that. We also are fortunate that we have a panel of parents, teachers, and individuals with ASD who will talk to us about strategies for teaching while at home, and also better ways of learning from sort of online Zoom education. So some lessons learned and some recommendations. So a little background on the network that is bringing you this conference. So this is the Autism Intervention Research Network for Behavioral Health. It is a partnership of academic and community partners aiming to increase equity or decrease disparities in access to effective interventions for children with ASD. And you can see that we have 7 research entities across the country who are involved. And each of these research sites has a number of community partners that they work with. Our local community partners, some of them are listed on the bottom of the slide. So Healthy African American Families, Regional Center Slark and Westside, Spectrum of Hope Foundation, and Fiesta Educativa, as well as our local public school systems. The ways in which we've tried to address disparities is by employing community partner participatory research methods. These were developed by Loretta Jones of Healthy African American Families, and it really helped us figure out how to work in the community. So it's where academic members become part of the community and the community members become part of the research team. It's very much strength-based, celebrating community capacities, with a balance of academic goals and community goals for the win-win. Healthy African American Families is currently headed by Felica Jones, and we are continuing this work going forward. So our AirB studies in the past have been really noted for large and diverse participant samples, rigorous scientific methods, interventions that are done in the community and not in university laboratories. And we have ongoing workshops where we are trying to work together to address important issues. One of those issues that came up in the last year was having children at home and learning through Zoom during this pandemic. And so we brought together a lot of different people with expertise where we developed methods and materials for both teaching children at home and then transitioning children back to school, which is going to have to happen and can be a shock for many of our students and for our families, although we're all looking forward to that day, I'm sure. So we held webinars in 3 different languages last fall. Those are available to be downloaded. The materials or handbooks are available for you to download on our network, airbnetwork.org. And we have just been refunded for another 5 years. And so now we're gearing up for new studies. In the past, we were developing interventions and then implementing those interventions in the community and showing that they could work for children with autism and their families. The bigger challenge is how to implement those interventions so that they actually sustain over time. And so our new challenge is taking the interventions that we've already developed, some of them are listed here, and then figuring out the ways in which we can help the community institution actually implement the intervention and sustain the intervention over time without the support of academic researchers. So that is our goal in the future, so stay tuned. We'll be reporting on progress over the next few years. So today, we just want you to enjoy today's conference, enjoy having question and answer with some of our presenters and facilitators. Our speakers and facilitators are listed here. The conference is being held in 3 different languages, and we really want to thank all of our participants. This could not have been possible without their participation. We also want to thank our volunteers who did translations for us, and our amazing team of organizers who have worked tirelessly to bring this conference to you. So Suli, Fernanda Castellan, and Consuelo Garcia. And of course, to our program officer and of our funding agency, HRSA, and our program officer is Lisa Hund. So again, enjoy today's conference, enjoy the day, and we hope to see you back in person next year.
All right, so that was a message from Dr. Connie Kasari. And Falika, you're here today. Would you like to say hi to the audience?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited that you're able to join us today for our 6th annual conference. And we hope that you truly enjoy it. We could not do it without you. And we hope you access all the information that has been developed here for your use. And we're so excited that you'll be able to attend us on this Friday afternoon. So thank you for being here. And I hope you have an exciting time with our conference.
Thank you, Falika. Okay, so the first topic of this conference is self-determination. So there is a distinction between how the term is used in research and how it's commonly used in the community setting, specifically at regional centers. It does stem from a similar idea, but you will see the difference as you watch the presentation by Dr. Brian Boyd, Associate Professor and Director of the Juniper Gardens Children's Project at the University of Kansas. Dr. Boyd's work involves the development and evaluation of evidence-based practices and how implicit bias and race affect the lives of autistic individuals of color. And his talk on self-determination and research will be followed by a presentation by our community expert, Sorrel Markowitz. She's a long-time partner of AirB and worked at the West Side Regional Center for 31 years, holding a variety of positions. Sorrel recently retired. Congratulations, Sorrel. But she continues to support families and actively participates in community service. So she will tell us about the Regional Center's self-determination program. And while watching these presentations, if you have any questions about self-determination, please jot them down and we'll have a chance to talk in smaller groups during our breakout session. So now let's hear from Dr. Boyd.
Hello, I'm Brian Boyd. I'm an associate professor at the University of Kansas. And today I'm going to talk to you about 2 issues that are separate but really interconnected. And one is the self-determination of people with disabilities, but also how issues of race and ethnicity or racial ethnic disparity can impact self-determination. So the title of the talk is Self-Determination Race, 2 Areas for Improvement in Autism Research and Practice. So being self-determined means acting or causing things to happen as you set and work toward goals in your life. So self-determination is really about young people being able to be causal agents or acting on their own will of volition to both set goals and make progress toward those goals. So to actually engage in goal achievement or goal attainment. And to some degree, self-determination is a personal characteristic. We all get better at self-determination as we feel more empowered to make our own choices over our lives. But self-determination has really been around in the field of disability since the 90s. And it does mean different things to different people, and it is defined somewhat differently by different groups. But I think the important thing to think about with self-determination is that self-determination doesn't necessarily mean that the individual has to act without support. We often need support to achieve goals that we set for ourselves, and so too may people with disabilities. So it's really though that they're acting, that they're deciding about that goal, that it's their choice, their decision. And they're also oftentimes making choices about what supports they think they need to achieve that goal. So being self-determined is about setting a goal and then making a plan towards achieving that goal. Again, with supports in place if needed. So there was a group at the University of Kansas, really led by Michael Waymeyer and Carrie Sjogren, who have helped to come up with this framework. And you can find more of their work at selfdetermination.org, the website there listed at the bottom. But there's sort of three aspects to self-determination. One, it's the individual. So in this case, the individual with disabilities who gets to decide their goal. It's their choice, their decision-making power. And it's often should be based on their strengths and their needs and where they see themselves going in the future. Where do they see their lives ending up? So empowering them to make that decision and then acting on that goal. So putting a plan in place to achieve the goal, thinking about what are barriers to progress, right? What do they already know about how to attain that goal? And what might they need to learn in order to achieve the goal they've set? But also part of it is just the belief in themselves. And we all sort of have trouble with this sometimes, believing we can do something, but not only believing they can do it, but being empowered to achieve that goal and identifying what supports or help they may need to achieve that goal. And if they have those three things, they can decide on their goal, they can act on that goal, take action towards achieving the goal, and they believe they can do it with appropriate supports into place. That's how we think about self-determined action. Another thing we know from 25 years of research is that self-determination is a real predictor of positive outcomes. So students with higher amounts of self-determination often make more progress. Students with disabilities, more progress in the general education curriculum. They achieve more of their goals. It is also being associated with better post-secondary outcomes. So they achieve better post-secondary outcomes after high school, whether that be post-secondary education or actually competitive employment. They have higher quality of life. So these are real important outcomes. And it makes sense if we feel more empowered to make choices over our lives, if we are able to actually achieve the goals we set, then that can lead to lots of other things. But there is this relationship between self-determination and race, ethnicity, and disability. So there's a measure called the Self-Determination Inventory. Again, a link is there for those who want to access it, and there's a self-report version of it. So students with disabilities or neurotypically developing students can report on their own self-determination. And what has been found, what was recently found in a study of over 4,000 students, is that we see disability differences. So students with autism spectrum disorder, intellectual disabilities, or other health impairments were found to have lower scores on self-determination than in comparison to white students without disabilities. And again, this is the students rating themselves on that measure of self-determination. There were also race ethnicity differences. So white students without disabilities were found to score higher on the self-determination inventory, the SDI, than Black or Latinx students without disabilities. So this wasn't, that particular bullet point isn't about disabilities, it's just racial ethnic differences. So in general, white students scored themselves higher on self-determination. There were also issues of intersectionality. So students with disabilities who were also more likely to be lower income, so based on them receiving free and reduced lunch at school, they were more likely to have lower scores or to rate themselves lower on this measure of self-determination in comparison to students with disabilities who weren't receiving free and reduced lunch. So we see disability differences with self-determination. We see race ethnicity differences, and we see issues of intersectionality where poor students with disabilities feel less self-determined, feeling like they have less ability to make their own choices, to make their own decisions, and have that sort of, and are able to achieve the goals that they set in their own lives. And racial ethnic disparities within the context of autism spectrum disorder play themselves out in different ways, as we know. There are disparities in diagnosis for Black and Latinx children. There are disparities in access to services. Black and Latinx children are more likely to receive fewer and lower quality services, live in areas with service deserts, not have coordinated care. And we even see differences, some studies have found, in how autism sort of looks in these populations. Some studies have found that Latinx children, for some reason, seem to show a more severe symptom presentation, so just have more symptoms of autism, higher levels of severity. And Black children are twice as likely as white children with autism to have a co-occurring intellectual disability. So we see racial ethnic disparities play themselves out in autism. And with a number of these findings, there is also intersectionality with income, that lower income families who are also racial ethnic minorities tend to do worse in some of these measures, in particular with access to services. So we see intersectionality play itself out not just specifically with self-determination, but also more broadly within the context of autism spectrum disorder. There is an evidence-based intervention, again, a website link is there, called the Self-Determined Learning Model of Instruction. And again, folks at the University of Kansas, Michael Waymeyer, Carrie Sjogren have really been involved in the development and testing of this intervention. And this is an evidence-based intervention for adolescent age students with autism that we know to prove self-determination skills. And it is the one that is linked to those better outcomes later in life that I showed you on the previous slide. So better post-secondary education, more likely to be in competitive employment, higher quality of life. The SDLMI specifically has been linked to better outcomes for students with disabilities and students without disabilities, actually, who feel more self-determined. And just briefly, it really asks students to do three things. They may seem simple, but there are three important things. It takes them through a process of setting a goal. So what is the goal they want to achieve? Developing a plan to actually achieve that goal, and really thinking through the process. What do I know about what I want to do? What do I already know about this? What do I need to learn in order to achieve this goal, right? And it doesn't matter what the goal is. It's really going through the process of really planning out and thinking through the goal setting and goal attainment process, right? We often, a lot of us set goals that we may not be able to achieve, but we feel empowered to be able to set that goal and figure out for ourselves if it's attainable or not. And then you go through a process of evaluating, all right, how am I doing with achieving this goal that I set? Do I need to adjust my plan because it doesn't look like I can achieve it? But empowering the student to do this. And so it's a decision-making process where teachers or others can support students in sort of goal setting and goal attainment. And I do just want to briefly end on a research opportunity where we are implementing the SDLMI intervention, or will be implemented at LAUSD school districts. And there will be remote implementation of SDLMI for students with autism, but also students with other types of disabilities, and really to work on self-determination, goal setting, problem solving, and all of this also involves self-direction and self-regulation, right? So if you're a parent or a school district and interested, there's the email for the ARB network. But it was wonderful talking to you today. Thank you, and there's more information about self-determination that is out there. Have a great day.
Okay, that was Dr. Boyd's presentation on self-determination and research. And again, if you have any questions, please bring them up during your breakout session later on. Now our community expert, Sorrel Markowitz, will tell us about the self-determination program at the Regional Center.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today with you. And I want to say that the basics of the self-determination program, the philosophy, whether a regional center or anywhere else, is similar. Self-determination in the regional center is a voluntary program. It's a program that requires that you are a client of the regional center under the Landerman Act. The program began some years ago, but has been generalized now and was open to select families who had applied to be part of the program, all based on the demographics of their regional center, their age, their disability, etc. However, coming up in June, as we have learned, the self-determination program will be open to others. It'll be available to anyone who actually wants to participate. It's a voluntary and alternative to the services that people typically receive through the regional center. And it allows and provides the opportunity for people who are receiving services through the regional center to have a lot more control over the services and the supports that they need. And existing services can be purchased from providers if they meet certain requirements, or local businesses. So families and individuals really do have the opportunity to receive services through workers or unique programs and agreements with local community resources. There is a freedom in that doesn't exist within the regular system. And providers do not need to be vendors of the regional center. So individuals receiving services and the families have an individual budget that they are able to utilize to purchase the services that are indicated on the IPP and that ensure the health and safety of the individual who's receiving the service. In order to be eligible for self-determination, the person must have a developmental disability. Next slide, Cons. And they must live in their own home in an independent living setting or in a group home. They must currently be receiving services through the Landerman Act. That means over the age of 3 or under 3 and already having a qualifying diagnosis for the Landerman provision. Some regional centers require that you first attend an informational session about self-determination and then attend an orientation session. Others require only that you attend an orientation session. And these sessions are offered by regional centers, and they are also offered by some of the community agencies, such as the Autism Society, for example. You can utilize the services of self-determination agency or choose your own agency only when there is not a generic resource available, and that would be a resource that anyone in the community could use regardless of whether or not they're a regional center provider. And for example, that would be IHSS or an education agency. You can manage the services and the supports. You must within your individual budget. And there is a requirement generally to use a financial management service that you choose that is vendored by the regional center. However, next slide, Cons. However, at this time during COVID, there has been the ability, they have waived the financial management situation, but it is temporary and we do not know how long that would last. So regional center was given a number of slots, as I said earlier, and it will be opening up in June to others. You do need to attend this informational session or orientation. And after selection, then your orientation situation changes and the information that you get is much more comprehensive. Next. It follows the person-centered planning process, and that includes the individual receiving the services and individuals who are familiar with that person and are chosen by them to participate. And the whole premise is very similar to what Dr. Boyd was talking about in terms of what are the goals that the person has and what kinds of choices can they make and how do we support those. And the budget and the IPP are both driven by the information that is identified in the person-centered plan and really directed by the individuals. However, it does not necessarily mean that everything that is included in the person-centered plan is funded by regional center, and that depends on what those things are and how all of that is negotiated. The individual budget is usually calculated once during a 12-month period. However, if there are new issues that arise and some things need to be added, that would be reviewed by the team and determined whether that would be an appropriate addition to your budget or not. It would reflect an unmet need that had not been identified prior. In addition, right now, people's budgets are a little less than they might have been at other times, behavior services being funded by insurance, etc. And so if there is an unmet need currently that had been discussed or participated in at a time earlier in the person's history, that may be considered an unmet need at the time that you are doing your initial IPP and person-centered plan. Go ahead. So individual families can choose an independent facilitator, and that person really helps to assist with the transition to self-determination and the services once you're in the program. They do not have to be paid, but most independent facilitators are paid, and this is an expense that does come from your budget. It appears that the independent facilitator cost is not something that would increase the amount of your budget. One important thing to note is that the person who is being your independent facilitator cannot be a person providing services to you in any other form. They cannot be your behavior service person. They cannot be your respite provider. They can't be a person you are paying out of your budget to support your individual in any other capacity. They can't be the IHSS provider. And the parent of a minor child cannot serve as the independent facilitator either, or their spouse of a married participant. Each regional center does have service coordinators who are trained to work with families in self-determination, and people can go forward and utilize the service coordinators that they have if they feel that that person would be a helpful person, knowing their child, knowing the resources, etc. For someone who's new to the regional center, the person-centered plan will help them determine the individual budget for that person, and then you would go forward and develop your budget. There is the requirement and hope, I would say, that the budget would be cost neutral. In some cases, that's the case. In other cases, that may not be the case. It will depend on what the needs are of the person at the time that it is being developed, and whether they are receiving traditional or self-determination services at the time. Next slide. As I said earlier, a financial management service is necessary. It must be vended through the regional center, and the whole idea is to help manage and direct the distribution of funds. Their role is to make sure that you have enough money in your budget to implement your IPP throughout the entire year. And there are numerous different services that they can be involved in, such as paying bills, facilitating employment services of the people that are working with you, etc. It's typically paid for, as I said, using funds from your budget, but at this point in time during COVID, that has been suspended, and we don't know when that will return. So it provides monthly statements to you and the regional center, so you are aware at all times of what's been spent and what funds remain. And during the year, you can actually transfer 10% of your funds from one budget category to another. And if necessary, if you can support the reason for additional transfer, that's possible as well. And again, needs to be approved by the regional center and the IPP team. The services and supports that are requested have to be eligible for federal matching funds. That is a list of supports that the federal government provides. And what makes this program much more flexible is that there are many more things that are available through the federal matching dollars rather than what is available in California now. It will include such things as camping, etc., that were removed from the California vendored services in 2009. I do want to say that the self-determination program is voluntary. I really want to make that clear. It is not a requirement, and there are families who will be working very well through self-determination, and some families will not choose that. And if you do not, there's nothing wrong with that. Your services will continue. If you decide to leave the self-determination program, you will have to remain out of that program for 12 months if you change your mind again. Last couple of slides, please.
Our timekeeper is asking us to wrap up, so if you can.
Okay. Okay. So, as I said, it's voluntary. You're required to use generic resources if they're available. You need to reside in community settings and just be able to attend the sessions that are necessary. It's a wonderful program. It gives you a lot of flexibility. And if there are any questions that you have later, please put them in the, keep them for the Q&A. And I will be there to answer questions. And my contact is at the end of this slide. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sorrel. That was a great overview of the self-determination program. So now we're going to break up into two groups. So when you registered for the conference, you were asked to select the early years and elementary school group or the middle, high, and transition into adulthood group. In the breakouts, you will have a discussion led by our moderators. And when we come back into this main room later, we'll share what each group discussed. Sorrel and Dr. Yolande Smith. Are you here, Yolande? Say hi. Oh, I see her there. Okay. Dr. Yolande Smith, she's an assistant professor in advanced studies in education and counseling at Cal State Long Beach. So Sorrel and Yolande will answer any questions that came up during the breakouts.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. I'm sure you all had very rich conversation in your breakout groups. I was able to drop in on the high school and adult breakout group. And so thank you for letting me listen and be a part of your group. What we're here for now is to just kind of answer any relevant questions or very critical questions that came from the groups, but more in an open format. We're sure that many of you have the same questions, and hopefully you got some of your answers in the breakout groups. But if there were any questions that were maybe not answered, or questions that sparked a conversation that we could probably bring to the larger group, now's the time for it. So facilitators, if there were questions from your groups that you would like to report out, and we're happy to answer them.
Yeah, I think we had a question that got slightly cut off, but from what I understand, the question was, during COVID, but in general, there's changes that happen in people's lives or changes in services, and services get cut off, service providers go out of business, things happen. And so at what point can a family get a contact regional center to get their services reassessed so that they can make sure that all of their needs are being met, regardless of whether it's an issue with COVID or anything else? It seems like they should be able to contact regional centers to ensure that, you know, if there's any changes in their services, that they can get those needs met.
I think I can answer that question, and we have other regional center people here as well who could answer those questions. But I want to say that whenever something like that occurs, you would immediately contact your regional center service coordinator and let them know what the status is. They may already know the status, but they also may not know the status. And so that would be your very first step so that you can get some support in reinstating services that were possible to reinstate, or finding alternatives to the providers that you were using who may no longer be providing services, etc. So my first recommendation would be contact your service coordinator and see what they can do and how they can support you. And of course, if your service coordinator doesn't respond to you after a period of time, couple of attempts, whatever, then you would probably move on to a supervisor who would be able to assist you as well.
Great. So if I can just recap for the person who asked it, anytime, regardless of why, there's an unmet need based on the services being provided, that families can reach out to their service provider to try and figure out how to get that need met.
Absolutely. That's what they're supposed to do. That's why your service coordinator is there, pretty much, to make sure that you're getting the services that you need, that are possible for the regional centers to fund. And if there is an issue with a service provider or anything like that, then the best way to get through some of those things is to contact your service coordinator and have them assist you in accessing whatever it is that you need.
Thank you. I had a question from a parent that mentioned that I keep hearing about not duplicating services. If the school district is providing a service that I'm not satisfied with, can I receive that service through self-determination?
Where's Naomi?
Pam, right here, that's the answer. Hi everyone, my name is Naomi Hagel. I am a program manager at South Central Los Angeles Regional Center, and I oversee the self-determination program at SARC. And the answer to that question is complicated because, and it's going to be very individualized. And self-determination and all regional center services should be very individualized to your unique needs and person-centered. But with that said, the question is, it said, I'm not satisfied with the school district service. The question will be, why aren't you satisfied with it? And is it meeting the needs? Because even if it's not your preferred service, if it's meeting the needs, then the regional center cannot supplant that service with funding because the school district is the generic resource. Now, if it's not meeting the needs, we then have to look at what type of service it is, because there are certain services in the self-determination waiver that the regional center is not allowed to purchase for children under the age of 21, including things like occupational therapy and speech therapy and physical therapy. Now, you may be able to get them from Medi-Cal or from private insurance instead, but the other option that the regional center should do in one way or another is assist you in advocating with the generic resource. Because it literally says in the Lanterman Act that service coordinators have to assist you with connecting to generic resources like the school district. So maybe they can help you with advocating for a service that you are satisfied with. Depending on the regional center, they may have an educational advocate position who can specifically assist you with that. So that's a conversation to have with your regional center.
Thank you, Naomi.
Naomi? Naomi?
Yes.
Okay. This is Florence. Thanks for sitting. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Really good. Nice meeting you.
You as well.
I have a question. There was some clarification that needed with a parent being part of IHSS and them being part of the self-determination, budget and how that all works. So could you clarify that?
So there's a couple different things going on there, I think. The first is that there's certain services that a parent cannot provide. For example, a parent cannot be a respite worker because how is the parent getting a break if the parent's the one providing the respite? In addition, though, what the question most likely is about is regarding the independent facilitator, because the parent of an adult child can be paid to be an independent facilitator in most cases. However, an independent facilitator cannot be paid if they're providing any other service to the participant. And there was definitely a belief that since in-home supportive services, or IHSS, is a generic resource not funded by the regional center, that wouldn't apply. However, it was actually myself and Adrian Jimenez from Lanterman Regional Center who accidentally got clarification on this from DDS. And we were advised that the statutes do not state that it can't be a regional center funded service. They state it can't be a service that's in the IPP. And since the Lanterman Act requires the IPP to identify all sources of generic funding and therefore the IHSS, then in the same way, the parent cannot be a paid independent facilitator and IHSS worker because they are then providing two services. So was that the question?
Yeah, sounded, yes. So I have a couple of questions myself. What, so what's the cutoff? Say for instance, they're in self-determination, it's, oh yeah, and they find out in December, oh, this is not right for me. So do they have to continue what they're doing until June and then go back to the traditional program or what?
The statute states that they should be able to change at any time and that the regional center should do whatever they can to ensure no disruption in service. So this hasn't come up at my regional center yet, but what I would aim to do is continue self-determination services to the end of 1 month and then at the same time be setting up traditional services to pick up at the beginning of the next month. Because the most important thing is that there's no gap in services and that the individual receives what they need, regardless of what service delivery system.
Okay. Well, what's this business about waiting? You have to wait until.
That's if they choose to leave self-determination. If they choose to leave self-determination, you have to wait 12 months before you can re-enter self-determination. But you don't have to wait 12 months to go back into traditional services.
Okay.
So are all from West Side or Liz from East LA? Have you run into any of that? Someone wanting to leave?
No, not yet. It's a little too early in the game. People are trying to hop on board. So far, so good.
I have a question.
But as far as I know, oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
As far as I know, there have been a couple of families at West Side who have dropped out of self-determination. And they have, from what I understand, and it happened prior to my leaving, they transitioned back into traditional services pretty easily. But then if they change their minds and want to go back into self-determination, they'll have to wait 12 months from the time that they dropped out to go back.
So a question came up regarding how the budget for self-determination will be decided. So if someone chooses to switch to self-determination, how does that budget get assessed and is the budget determined?
The budget is dependent on, is based on looking at what your services were in the last 12 months and the person-centered plan, and then the IPP, what the goals and objectives are. And I think probably Naomi can expand on that even more than I can, but overall, that is how your budget is determined. And it's why during my presentation, I mentioned the fact that right now, given COVID and also given the fact that when self-determination was first beginning, things like behavior services and all of that was included because the regional centers were funding behavior services for individuals. Now private insurance and Medi-Cal have taken over much of that funding. So a large source of income for the budget is gone. And so, you know, there's a whole, during the person-centered plan, you'd be looking at what the current needs are, what's currently being funded, and possibly what unmet needs may be coming up or have already been documented. But you guys who are still there, go ahead and add.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the next part. Thank you so much, all the moderators and the audience, for a great participation. This was really helpful. So the second part of the conference is the community panel. We're going to talk about successes and strategies during COVID, facilitated by Ms. Aziza Lucas-Wright and Fernanda. And Aziza is an assistant professor, the vice chair of the Department of Preventative and Social Medicine, co-chair of the Division of Community Engagement, and co-chair of the Academic Senate's Clinical and Community Programs at Charles R. Drew University. She's also a consultant to Healthy African American Families. And as Aziza moderates this panel session, if you, the audience, have any questions, please post them in the chat. Fernanda will be keeping an eye on it. Okay, I think that's it for me. Thank you, and please welcome Aziza.
Thank you. So I'm happy to introduce the three panelists who are with us today. First, please meet Josh Hudson. Josh is familiar with engaging with students, families, and community members. He has a heart for special education. Josh is currently the lead resource specialist at Brio College Prep, a charter school in downtown Los Angeles. And prior to his role, he has spent many years as a first-generation high school and college with recruitment of first-generation high school and college students, and lots of work in social and restorative justice. So alongside his classroom, Josh also organizes for Black self-determination through his faculty advisor and as a fellow in leadership for educational equity. I'd also like to introduce you to Brenda Martinez, born in Mexico City, raised by her grandmother. And Brenda has 2 children on the spectrum. Brenda also has many roles: a bilingual parent advocate for 15 years, an IEP consultant, board member of her neighborhood council, member of the environmental committee, and leader of a grassroots organization that educates about the effects of 5G and promotes for changes in Federal Communications Commission for more green spaces in urban areas. And then rounding off that panel is Katie Gronenthal, passionate about history and preservation. Preservation. Katie is currently attending the Evolve into Workplace Employment Readiness Program 15, where she is leading, learning valuable soft skills in order to enter into the competitive workforce. Through Evolve, Katie has secured an internship at the Santa Monica Museum in their archiving department. And so that's excellent. We have a wonderful panel. And so I'd like to ask you some questions. We have 5 questions, panelists, that we would like you to respond to. And we're going to have, there are 5, but we will not ask everyone to answer all of them, but we will ask everyone to answer, how has distance learning been working out for you? And you have just about a minute to respond to that. So Josh, we'll start with you. Should I read the question again, or you got it?
Oh, I got it. But first, want to say thank you for welcoming here. And then in terms to sum up, COVID-19 and distance learning, it's been a difficult transition, especially as a teacher, particularly like not only the abrupt of like shifting everything online. So I would say some of our difficulties was not only like creating like a new learning system and like making sure things are good to go, but also particularly working in special education. Like, how do we create like a schedule, particularly like, because the traditional bell schedule when we first started would have not worked in this situation. And so doing that transition to like figuring out blocks and also managing our time on a screen and also trying to provide support without hurting our eyes, you know, like now I know what blue filter eyeglasses feel like now. And so, and also one of the other difficulties was like, how do we support like our students, because the distance learning like limited like learning preferences. Like we couldn't like easily like tackle all of them because now it's just like one-on-one screen. And like, how do we develop like rapport, especially because I work in a high school and like, you know, in this transition, we had new students who came through too. So those are some of like the difficult challenges with like distance learning. And I'll end there since it's a minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. Would you like to field that question? Unmute yourself, Brenda, if you can. You got that? Can we unmute her? There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation, Sue and Consuelo. Thank you for the great job organizing all this, and for everyone who's attended. Well, as a parent, the distance learning has definitely not worked out. Unfortunately, for many of our children in the spectrum who lack the social pragmatics, it's being sort of like counterproductive, like a counter effect. So they were used to getting out, having a routine, and now it's like going going back. Oh, let me see. Can you guys hear me? Is this better?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Going back, trying to maintain a routine is the most difficult thing. And yeah, you're right, Josh. The schedules don't work. Um, what we need to do is just maintain continuity, and constant reminders, and keep them focused, and also interchange. So I requested my son's teachers to give me some work that he can do writing, so that he keeps his focus. And I was able to observe what is it that he's struggling the most, where he needs to stay focused, and then we will switch to a notebook or a workbook, and so just being able to transition them constantly from being in the tablet to something different, to using manipulative, so that they can stay focused, and we can take advantage of the actual learning aspect of it. So it's definitely been very, very challenging. So I am a stay-home mom, so I'm able, and I'm really, really in tune with my kids. I've always been involved, but I definitely heard from many parents this being a humongous challenge, because they cannot keep up, because they didn't know how they could learn before the distance learning. So they were just learning as the time was passing. So, but yeah, it's been very challenging. So thank you.
Thank you. So in 1 minute, Katie, or about, can you tell us what it's been like for you trying to do distance learning?
Yes, as a disabled person trying to, figure out how to make this work in this pandemic, it has been a struggle. And what's really helpful to me is just remember I'm not alone. There are other people in the same boat. My program coordinators, the rest of my cohort, and even watching my mother, who is an educator, struggle with this has helped. Just not feeling alone and remembering to keep my motivation up, because being in this program is important to me, and I need that motivation, and I know that can be really, really hard when you're working at home. So it's just a struggle, and it's good to remember that you're not alone in that struggle.
Josh, just thinking about those struggles, what are some strategies that you have used that work well for you during this time?
Yeah. So one of the things that I felt like helped me out a lot in the beginning was, so when we returned in fall virtual, and students still having to navigate it, particularly families, is with students in my caseload, I had like kind of like a 30-day IEP, but rather than a 30-day IEP, kind of like I called it more like a family plan meeting, where we like asked, and I would ask the families like, okay, what is like your work schedule like? What is like daily life for your like children at home? What is like the environment and everything? And this is more of a way to understand, like, particularly because I work with 11th and 12th grade, to figure out like, all right, if I communicate around this time with the student, they might not respond, because to the family, this might be times where they're like having other obligations, or I also find out about my students' sleeping schedule, but also to adding the note that like I've had rapport with my students, because this is like I looped with my students to the following year. So like emphasizing key on like not only the parents understanding, but like that meeting like helped out a lot address kind of like what is currently going on and like where could we meet the middle with like our school environment. And then another thing too, in terms of strategies with students, there's this tool I like to help encourage with them called Toggle. And it's like this little timer thing that they could add to their like Google Chrome. And you can set it up to where times to do a task for like 25 minutes to 30. And once it does like a soft ding. And it like, after that, it tells them to like take a break. And it's like, because I'm wanting to encourage to them like, all right, you don't need to be on screen this whole time. And then also collaborating with other teachers and making sure that they like have this like set for their assignments and expectation for students like, all right, like we are having a tough time being on screen all along. How can we have this also same expectation for our students? So it's making sure that we like provide like work and supports like through that. And that's just to name it in a minute. And also Toggle, TOGGL. It'll be like a little purple extension.
Okay. So Brenda, if you have one suggestion you would give families, teachers, parents working from home, what would it be? One good suggestion.
Oh boy, that's a really good one. Definitely, something that I encourage even to parents that I work with is take some time, take a little break. Parents need a break. We feel that just being home means we'll have to be constantly working with our kids, cooking, cleaning, taking care of our own jobs. So I definitely encourage parents to have a little time for themselves. I think that's important. And also, I also encourage parents to have a little time, a fun time with their kids. So we have pulled all the dusty, games and sit down and play Monopoly and play, whatever, create our own games. My kid is very artistic, and we created a game that is called Draw the Line, and that means that one person draws a line in a whiteboard and it passes on to the next person, and that person has to make something out of that line. And it's fun, because we sit down together, we get to talk, we're guessing, we're getting excited. Of course, my kid can only do like 1 or 2 rounds, but it's that time, that bonding time. So I definitely encourage parents to take a little time for themselves, but also take some time and do some bonding with your own kid. It's not always about the work and the academics and being on the computer. Just shut everything out for a few minutes and go for a walk. Ride a bicycle. You know, step out to your porch or to the street and whatever. I mean, just do something totally different outside of the electronics. So, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
Those are great. Katie, do you have any suggestions?
Yes, a lot of mine are in the same vein as Josh and Brenda's. I'm pretty reliant on timers for, when to schedule breaks. So getting phone timers or calendars so what's going to happen in the day ahead of time. Because I find when I'm doing distance learning, the days kind of blend together. So I need to make more of an effort to make them stand out. And another strategy I use is also making sure that the time I'm distance learning is distinct from the rest of my time at home. So even though my workstation is only about 20 feet from my bed, I still get up, get dressed, put on my makeup, all that stuff to help me feel more normal, because I feel I work better when I'm sitting at a table versus if I was just sitting in bed, even though, I'm still in my apartment. It's a world of difference to be upright, at attention at the table versus just laying down.
Thank you.
Can I add something real quick, Asisa?
Sure, Brenda.
I just want to say that what worked really good for us, because Katie's mentioning the schedules, and I know they keep mentioning schedules and apps, but what really worked for me is getting a big a board from the store, getting all different color markers, and have my son do his own schedule, posting it in front of his computer, in front of the area where he's like, and we did several, and sometimes we even post them on the bathroom. So color coding it gives them a really good sense of where they are in what moment, and the days too. So I color coded the days, I color coded the times, the classes, and then he even get to put little stickers on whichever class, so that it could help him remember. So I think that's a really effective thing that worked for us.
Thank you. So Josh, can you answer this one? Pamela Colvin has asked, have you found that you have needed additional support, like a support group, mental health, counseling, since COVID due to anxiety, sadness, or fears?
Is that for me personally or for like our students?
However you want to.
I would say both. I would feel like in this, I would say in this time, like, I wouldn't say it not slightly like created novel problems. It just exposed just a lot of things like in the open with it all. And that it pushed a lot, like even more of an emphasis for like mental health and like support for not only like educators, but just also like our students. As we mentioned, like as was mentioned in the panel, like, there was like a separation from like the school setting in our home settings. And now it's like all blended and mesh, and it could always seem endless. And even with like timers and stuff, it could feel like overwhelming. So I would say for me personally, like, I feel like, yes, like I've had to seek out for like more like additional supports. And this is coming from like a perspective where like I was even like open and already having mental supports prior to like the COVID era.
Okay. Well, thank you. So we are rounding off our time. And so what we wanted to do was to remind you that at the end of this session, we would love for you to take a survey. It is extremely brief, very short. I think just 1 or 2 questions. And so we would really ask that you let us hear from you by way of those surveys right at the end. And so we thank you. I think that are we right on time?
Yes, I think now we can move on to open Q&A from the audience.
Okay.
Thank you, Asisa.
Thank you.
All righty. Yeah, I think that's it for today. And we really, really appreciate you being here. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure to talk about these kinds of things and help people out.
Thank you.
Same here.
Yeah, we need to reconnect with each other, even if it's
even if it's not the type of autism conference you're expecting.
Okay, so everyone please fill out the evaluation survey in the chat, and I think we're free to go. Thank you so much.